much for your contributions, and I think it might be helpful if we hear just even a couple of minutes from Ms McCord and Ms Curran, who've done the research on this, just the details of what actually goes on in the industry, because although some people may have read all the details and be very familiar with it, others may not. So just a little bit of fleshing out of that might be helpful. But I think it's very, very clear.
Do that now?
Well, even a couple of minutes if they had it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just to say, I think when the Low Pay Commission commented that there wasn't sufficient research done on it, I would disagree with that. For a start, I think that it's unfortunate that they didn't do a survey themselves or interview people themselves and get that experience themselves. And going particularly to unions to ask about that experience is problematic as well, because it's very much a non-unionised sector and something that's notoriously difficult to organise because of the nature of the work. But we have been attempting to do that. In the last fortnight alone, we've been in all around Dublin city centre discussing with workers. And one of our members who's here in the gallery today, who also worked in the sector for 11 years, will tell you herself that out of the 9 places that she worked in, only 1 gave her tips. So 8 of them didn't. And that is the experience that she's picking up on the ground from people. That's what they're telling. People are saying when they go into the restaurants and they ask directly what the workers' experience is. It's all of the things that we said in the statement, apart from the theft of wages or through the tips. There's insecurity in terms of hours and shifts, which constantly are changing, and that's used as control as well for people. Sexual harassment is a huge issue for female workers in the service as well. And safety in terms of getting home from work. Sometimes if they don't get their tips, they can't afford a taxi late at night. So it's that precarious nature is certainly the feedback that we're getting. And I know that there's other research done. I know that Sinn Féin did a survey as well of people, and I know that SIPTU have, and Deirdre, who's probably the expert on it, actually has done quite a lot on it. So maybe I'll let you explain some of that.
Okay, so I'm an academic in NUI Galway. I'm obsessed with data. And so when Minister Doherty comes out and says on national radio that employers in the main treat their staff in the hospitality sector the way you'd want to treat members of your own family, it's very frustrating because she has no evidence to support that, and up until recently we've had very little evidence to refute it. I have some sympathy for the Low Pay Commission because, as has already been mentioned, while they did consult with union representatives, this is an ununionised, largely ununionised sector. So how do you get at the people who are most affected? And so the Low Pay Commission report, the silent voice, the screamingly silent voice for me, was the actual workers themselves. So I have embarked on a path to try and address the lack of empirical independent evidence on working conditions in the hospitality sector. And it's part of a research agenda that is ongoing and will continue. But what it is revealing to me is shocking levels of ill treatment and abuse of workers' rights. And I have been saying repeatedly that tips is only the tip of the iceberg, but the research that I've done addresses the issue of tips. But beyond that, there is a culture of ill treatment within the hospitality sector. And while we had some anecdotal evidence of that, and most people in the street have an awareness of that, we had no solid evidence. So from the research that I've just done recently, for example, 76% of respondents experience verbal abuse sometimes or often. 76% of respondents. 64% experience psychological abuse sometimes or often. And 15% experience physical abuse sometimes or often. So 15 is a low number, but what number would you like for experiencing physical abuse sometimes or often? When people are abused, and this was asked in the survey, when you experience abuse, who's the likely perpetrator? Overwhelmingly someone in a position of power, chef, owner, manager. They were asked, if you've experienced abuse, who did you report it to? Overwhelming answer, nobody. Of the people who did report it to somebody, they were asked what was the outcome of that. And 15% said if the abuse was reported, action was taken to address the issue. Only in 15% of cases that went to report the abuse was action taken. So there was lots of evidence as well. You know, the stuff I'm referring to now is by way of survey data. The survey was very comprehensive. There were 38 questions. Sexual harassment is very prevalent. So 55% of the survey respondents, and there was 257 of them, had witnessed or experienced harassment. Most common forms of harassment, sexual, based on age or race. 63% had witnessed or experienced bullying. So, I mean, I could go on. 48% said that they have no access at all to voice in the workplace. They have no voice at all in the workplace. And there's clearly, you know, they're clearly crying out for voice. In addition to the survey, the last question said, if you're willing to talk to the researcher further, please leave your details. I was hoping for 10 or 15 so I could get more depth. 100 people left their details. That sent me into a panic because I have no resources, no funding for this research. But I wanted to give a voice to anybody who wanted a voice. So I've offered people the opportunity of sending me an audio file responding to 3 questions. What do you like about working in hospitality? What do you not like? Tell me about an incident where you felt unfairly or badly treated. What happened? What action did you take? What was the outcome? And how did it make you feel? If people don't want to do the audio file, I will meet them face to face. I've travelled around the country to meet these people. I have been researching for 3 decades now, and I have never done research that has kept me awake at night. These people are crying out for a voice and they're crying out for protection. But just to focus specifically on the tips issue, 23% of the respondents said that tips were kept in whole or in part by management. 47% said that there was some kind of a system for distributing tips, but it either wasn't clear what the system was or the system wasn't considered to be fair. When they were asked about what tips were used for, the kind of things they said were to cover the staff party, which sometimes didn't even happen, to cover a Christmas bonus, but it wasn't clear the relationship between the amount of tips and the amount of the bonus, to top up the till, to pay for newspapers, to pay for walkouts, to pay for breakages. Not one person said that tips were used to supplement their wages. So the bill that's been proposed by the Minister is addressing an issue that, from the research I've done and from other sources of research like the Union of Students of Ireland and the Galway Hospitality Campaign, it simply is a non-issue. There is a massive issue about tips being stolen from employees, and I noted that the employer bodies took exception to the term stolen, but what do you call it when money that was intended for one person is taken by another? You know, with this survey, as well as asking people discrete questions, you know, do you get your fair share of the tips, it invited people to submit more detail. The average time devoted to responding to the survey was 20 minutes, which is fairly comprehensive in a world where people don't like doing surveys and their average attention span is 2.5 minutes. So a lot of people give an awful lot of data, and they're continuing to do so with the audio files and the interviews that I've been doing. One of my favourite quotes from a respondent about tips was, all of the tips in this establishment are given to a children's hospital according to managers, but I've never seen any proof of this, and it's widely believed to be a lie.
I think that was very helpful.
Thank you very much, Dr. Curran.
Clearly that testimony would be very helpful, I think, to the Low Pay Commission. I assume you haven't looked at that research.
I gather it's after we did, but we'd be really keen to pursue this. So obviously it would be a good idea if we were able to put this bill on hold, on ice, and the Low Pay Commission have a review of the advice that they've given in relation to this bill, because clearly it's not ill-advised, but there's a gap in the advice that you're given. There's a huge void in terms of the robust advice that you're given to support this bill from the government. Because clearly what's happening here is the Minister, like she did with the Sinn Féin Bandit Hours bill, is now trying to, if you like, head off Senator Gavan's bill and produce her own, whereas, as the unions have said, and I think they're well placed to have an opinion on it, Senator Gavan's bill does a hell of a lot more to address the problem in the sector. But I just want to ask you, do you think there's not a huge irony here in that the advice you give to the state on this bill is accepted,
but the advice you've given to increase the minimum wage by 30 cents an hour has been rejected in the latest budgets. Forget about that. Don't mind the Low Pay Commission's advice on 30 cents an hour and the minimum wage when it comes to the budget and how workers are treated, but they accept this one.
You're right, Deputy, is that our job is to give advice and the government has to decide whether they're accepting or rejecting it. My understanding is, and a lot has happened in the last couple of days, is the government have accepted the recommendation that a majority of the Commission made to increase the minimum wage by 30 cents to €10.10. But what they haven't done, and we didn't recommend a particular date on which that might be operative, I gather, and I think what the government are, my understanding is, subject to correction, is that the government are waiting to see how the current uncertainty...
Dr Butler and Deputy Smith, try and narrow it back towards the bill. From the point of view of this is specifically pre-legislative. I'm not. No. I know the point you're making, but I know the point.
I know the point I'm making is political, but I also think that the Minister's attempt to usurp Senator Gavan's bill is very
I've taken that point. The committee will deal with Senator
Yeah.
Gavan's bill. We've already discussed that.
One last question for the Commissioner on Low Pay, and that is this: that when you look at the profits in the hospitality industry, they've gone above what they were at pre-crash levels. Would you, in your opinion, have an opinion on the fact that the service charge, which we all go into a restaurant, you look at it and you say, oh, I don't have to leave a tip there because that's paid, that not being returned to workers has helped to increase their profits to the level that they're at?
Well, to the extent that the service charge isn't passed, by the way, the service charge should be passed on to workers. There's no, I think everyone who looks at this issue agrees
except the employer.
Well, maybe some employers, I don't know.
Well, that'll be part of our report.
Is that if well, clearly it follows that if, for example, employers are retaining some element of the service charge, that does increase their profit or reduce their losses in some cases. That just follows.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. Senator Higgins.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Tesla Butler. I mean, thank you for your presentation, and I know that the Low Pay Commission, have from both the hotel, but the opinion of the Low Pay Commission, as I understand it, was that a code of practice would not